The moon of Dorado was a seething crimson orb of gas, wreathed in violent filaments of blazing blue lightning. 3 years ago, the moon's molten core had been tapped to produce power for Bajor, the world it orbited. And the only cost for that benefit was that what had once been an inhabited Class M moon was now a Class Y demon world on which an unprotected visitor would live for less time than it took to draw a breath. The ship that now took up a non-standard orbit around the hellish moon appeared to be an ordinary Sagittarian cruiser, its gleaming yellow hull making electric contrast with Dorado's red clouds. Inside the cruiser, though, Sisko had a better sense of the vessel's survivability. Though it looked Sagittarian on the outside, it was pure Cardassian within. It was liberally outfitted with hidden weapons and capable of outrunning almost any other ship in the sector. Sisko watched a false color image of the moon's hidden surface scrolled across the main bridge viewer of Tyrell's cruiser. You actually plan to beam down there? Tyrell nodded. We've found the abandoned village, and from the details on that map, we can narrow down the orb's location to perhaps a square kilometer of surface area, and search. Tyrell, how did you manage to misplace an orb on the station and have it turn up on this moon? Tyrell stood up from her chair. It's not the same orb, Captain. It's the second. When I find it, then I can return to Terok Nor and find the first. Then, with Vash's orb, I will have all three and I will not need equipment to open a wormhole. According to the ancient texts we've deciphered, I merely have to bring the 3 orbs together. Dr. Bataan walked slowly onto the bridge. He was wearing a bulky Cardassian environmental suit. In his gloved hands, he carried the red hourglass-shaped crystal which Vash had brought to DS9. Sisko was startled to see that it wasn't as impenetrably dark as it had first appeared to be. Tyrell looked at Sisko. See that glow inside? It means it's getting closer to its missing mate. But Captain, you still have to answer my questions. Sisko had known that was coming. All right. You want to know how to negotiate with the wormhole aliens. Tyrell nodded. You've dealt with them and returned. My people never did. What's your secret? Sisko went to the environmental suit Dr. Bataan pointed out. There is no secret, Tyrell. The prophets, the aliens, are in complete control the entire time. They initiate contact. They control the length of contact. And then they terminate contact. Why they, or beings like them, didn't allow your people to return, I can't say. After Tyrell snapped Sisko's helmet closed, she sealed it. Keep thinking, Captain. I'm sure you'll come up with something more useful in the next hour. Why an hour? Because that's just about how long these suits will stand up to the corrosive atmosphere down there. Tyrell, Dr. Bataan, and Sisko stepped up on the transporter platform at the side of the bridge. Tyrell gave the order to Atrig, who was going to remain on the ship. Energize. Quark lightly moved his finger toward the open area at the front of his holding cell, and marveled at the sudden shock of the simulated security force field. The cell across from Quark's held Bashir, Kira, and Jadzia. Jake and Nog were in the cell to the right. Jadzia called out to Quark. We should try and find a way to shut down this simulation. You must have some kind of override on your holosuites. Can't you try shutting it down? Quark raised his hands to the simulated ceiling. Don't you people get it? This isn't one of my holo programs. My prisons have chains on the wall, metal rings on the floor, a complete selection of whips and restraints for every taste. And your choice of beverage. I have no idea where this came from. Quark, could you at least try? The Ferengi huffed with impatience. Computer, end program. There, are you happy? Quark, try an override, please. Computer, this is Quark. I need an emergency shutdown in Holosuite A. Please state your password. Quark froze. How could he reveal his password to everyone? He cleared his throat. Computer, this is Quark, and I don't want to hear any snickering. Password, Big Lobes. Big Lobes, authenticated. Emergency shutdown procedure is not available. Priority override is in effect during state of emergency. This simulation will run for an additional 2 hours, 33 minutes, or until terminated by Prefect Terrell. Quark shrugged, totally defeated. He looked out past the security office to the doors to the promenade. As gloomy as it was out there in the abnormal blue Cardassian lighting Quark remembered so well and hated so much from the old days on the station, he sighed. If this simulation is so accurate, I wish we could get one of those pedestrians out there to come in. Odo snorted. If it's an accurate simulation from the occupation, no one will. This wasn't the favorite place on the station for Bajorans or Cardassians. But someone did enter through the main doors. A human, in a tuxedo 400 years out of style, strolled into the cell area. It was Vic, the holographic mid-20th century lounge singer. Hey gang, looks like you cats could use a cake with a file baked in it. Vic, I don't know what you're talking about, but you gotta get us out of here. I know. You're innocent, right? Odo spoke up. We're more than innocent. We've been put here by the real criminals who are now running loose. Kira shook her head in disbelief. Vic, how can you be here? Vic shrugged. You got me, dollface. There I am, up on stage at my joint singing my heart out for the blue rinse set. Next thing I know, the lights start flickering and the power goes out. Odo interrupted. Vic, I'm sure this is all fascinating, but could you go back to the center office and open the little drawer to the left of the chair, right under the display screen? Is that going to help get the power back on? Odo pleaded with him. Vic, the drawer! You got it, Pally. What exactly am I looking for? An optolythic data rod. Vic held up his hands. Whoa, slow down, Stretch. I'm strictly a 20th century hologram. Jadzia called from her cell. It's going to look like a fat, transparent green pencil. Vic walked out of the holding cell area and soon returned holding the optolythic crystal in his hand. Odo gave him the instructions. Put the fat green pencil in the slot by the door frame and slide it in. At once, the security force fields flickered and the prisoners jumped out of their cells to join Vic. He rubbed his hands together. So, what do you say we all come back to my place? Drinks are on the house. Jadzia looked at Vic. We can't just yet. We still have to shut down this simulation. Kira appeared in the doorway holding a Cardassian phaser. She then aimed the weapon at the far wall. Quark groaned. There goes my insurance. Half of the holding cell area began to waver, and finally winked out. Quark grimaced as 3 clusters of green hollow emitters exploded. Someone's gonna pay for that. Then Quark saw Vic. The hologram was wavering, sparking with holographic scan lines, and going transparent. You know, gang, all of a sudden, I'm not feeling so hot. Vic shuffled toward a wall of functional hollow emitters, and Quark was surprised to see a gray metal door materialize with a red sign reading, Exit, just above it. See ya in the funny papers. Sisko was in hell. It was the only way to describe what the Bajoran moon Gerardo had become. The ground was nothing more than stone and shifting ribbons of storm-driven dirt. He cringed as roiling crimson swirls and eddies of corrosive gas appeared like entrails twisting all around him. Terrell's harsh voice crackled at him through his helmet speakers. In that building! Dr. Bataan held up the red orb and swung it slowly toward the ancient stone wall to which Terrell pointed. The pale red light within the orb intensified slightly. Sisko trudged ahead. The building, perhaps a farmer's market a millennium ago, was larger than most in the village. The doorway through the wall was still in perfect condition. The ground was littered with stones and tiles from the collapsed roof. The glow of the red orb was much stronger now. Sisko watched as Terrell used a tricorder, aiming it at the ground and showing the results to Dr. Baton. Terrell informed Sisko.
There's a chamber under this floor. Dr. Baton's going to find a way down.
Dr. Baton walked carefully back and forth across the rubble-strewn floor, using the red orb as if it were some primitive dowsing tool. Sisko shouted with some difficulty to Terrell.
You don't need me down here. I will, Captain. Dr. Baton will keep Vasha's orb, but I need you to carry the second. You've survived contact with orbs before. The red orb claimed 7 of my researchers. I won't risk touching them. What about Dr. Baton? He handled the first orb years ago on Terok Nor. After that, he became addicted to neurodepressants. By taking them, he can't hear the voices. Have any of you thought that perhaps these orbs aren't shaping up to be the best transportation system? There are ways around the orb's psychic effects. That's why I had my soldiers save Quark from hanging on the day of withdrawal. Ferengi are resistant to most forms of telepathy. Even betazoids can't get past those 4 brain lobes. So I told Atrig to bring me one of the Ferengi from the promenade, and he brought me Quark and Odo. What about Garak? Very good, Captain. Garak came on his own. He and I never really got along, but Gul Dukat and he were involved in something. It's not important, but he and Odo and Quark did enter my lab that day.
Sisko touched her arm.
What happened to Quark and Odo and Garak? 22 minutes before the self-destruct went off, the 3 of them staggered out of my lab. When I looked inside, the red orb was gone. I stunned them and left the station. I thought everything would be lost when it auto-destructed, but it failed to do so.
Sisko turned and saw Dr. Baton firing a phaser blast into the ground.
He's found a way down, Captain. The orb's not far.
Terrell aimed her shoulder lights into the pit Dr. Baton had created.
Down there.
Sisko moved cautiously to the side of the opening. Dr. Baton had already thrown a rope down to assist Sisko's descent. Sisko took the rope in his clumsy Cardassian gloves and slowly edged himself off the side and into the hole. A few seconds later, he was standing on the floor and looking in the direction in which the second orb was supposed to be found. He saw a pristine wall carved with the largest Bajoran mural he had ever seen.
What's wrong, Captain? Nothing. If the orb's down here, it might be hidden in a wall. I'll check it out.
Then he walked slowly over to the mural to see if he could find any place that an orb might be. There, in the mural, the distinctive Bajoran spiral that signified the opening of the Celestial Temple. Though this spiral curved the opposite way from most others Sisko had seen. He moved closer to the stone block in which the spiral was carved. It didn't fit tightly to the other stones in the wall. He pressed his body against it. The stone block swung up, little more than a slender slab of rock. And behind it, in a hollow chamber no larger than an orb arc, a second red orb glowed brightly, throwing off small flares of red light. Sisko reported to Terrell.
I found it!
Her only answer was,
We have 19 minutes.
Carefully, Sisko removed the orb from its protective shelter. Terrell told him to tie the rope to his belt so they could pull both him and the orb up. By the time he had emerged from the hole in the floor, both orbs were blazing brightly enough that they couldn't be looked at directly. Terrell called out for Atrig, who was still on the cruiser.
Lock onto our beacons and energize.
In that split second, Sisko suddenly knew that Terrell couldn't be allowed to control the red orbs. He swung the orb he had retrieved directly at Dr. Patan's helmet. As the Cardassian doctor stumbled backward, horrified, dropping Vash's orb to press his gloves to the rapidly growing network of cracks that spread across his corroded helmet, Sisko yanked his own transporter beacon off and threw it away. Terrell was still fumbling for her phaser as she began to dissolve in the transporter beam. Dr. Baton's helmet suddenly exploded like fine crystal an instant before he was beamed away as well. Sisko didn't stop to ask himself what he thought he had done. Instead, with only 15 minutes of life remaining, he concentrated only on what he still had to do. He tucked Vash's orb under one arm, secured the second orb under his other arm, then began to run. He knew he had only 15 minutes in which to hide the red orbs so they could never be found again. Not by Terrell, not by anyone. Finally, he located a wall and made out the shape of a relatively flat paving stone on which he could place the orbs. All that he needed now was some way to dislodge the wall, get it started falling in the right direction. He decided to check out the far side. He couldn't afford to waste the time it would take to make his way around it, so he risked tearing his suit as he half clambered over a pile of rubble at its side and wedged his boot. Sisko groaned. He was trapped 2 meters above ground level, visible from any direction, with no place to hide the orbs. Sisko trembled with frustration as he tugged at his boot. He picked up another rock and bashed the offending boot with it, but all he managed to do was wedge it in deeper. Warning, loss of atmospheric integrity in 3 minutes. There was nothing for him to do but lift up a rock and smash it against the red orbs of Jalvador. Again and again he brought the rock down, but the simple matter of normal space-time was no match for the solidified energy vortices of a non-linear realm. The orbs withstood his attack, untouched. 30 seconds. Then he lifted the red orb as high as he could possibly stretch, and his arms were locked in position. Something was holding them. He twisted around in the bulky Cardassian suit to see a white shape glowing in the brilliance of his shoulder lights. The luminous being moved closer to him, put its arm around Sisko's shoulders, tapped itself once, then all was still. In the light of a transporter beam, Sisko could finally see through his helmet and the helmet of the angel who had come to save him. Everything would be all right now. It was Jake. Sisko stood on the promenade with Kira, outside the entrance to the Bajoran temple. In each hand he carried a simple cloth bag, and in each bag was a red orb of Jalvador. Less than 26 hours after his dramatic rescue on Gerardo, Deep Space Nine was nearly back to normal. Of Terrell's fate, no one knew. There was no record of a Sagittarian cruiser breaking orbit of Gerardo. A gravity disturbance might have pulled it into a deadly descent. Sisko had told Quark and Odo what Terrell had told him about what had happened to them on the day of withdrawal. Odo flatly refused to believe her account. But Quark had started talking to Jake about collaborating on a novel based on the incident. The Defiant was safely in dock again, after fielding the massive search party that had led to Sisko's discovery. Sisko turned to Kira. It's time to end it. Captain, we still don't know who killed Dal Nortran. Sisko agreed and lifted the bags. Or who hid the orb on Gerardo. But with these in safe hands, we'll have time to sort it all out at our leisure. Sisko entered the temple. Kai Wynn was there to greet him. Welcome, emissary. And these are the artifacts? Sisko carefully pulled the orbs from their wrappings and placed them on a small table. The steady glow they had developed on Gerardo had now become a gentle pulsing, slowly dimming, slowly brightening, 3 times each minute. The Kai smiled. Oh my, they are clever, aren't they? I could see how many people might think they are somehow related to the orbs of the prophets. I beg your pardon? These are the red orbs of Jalvador. The Kai smiled again. Oh, emissary, I know you are new to our ancient traditions. These red orbs of Jalvador They are but a legend from a troubled time in our past. Kira was outraged. Kai Wynn, you knew why we asked you up here. These are the orbs. Look at the way they're glowing. Child, I am sure that as much as you and the emissary might want to believe in the tales of Jalbador, a few days of study would reveal the secret of these objects to be nothing more than some novel chemical reaction. Sisko took a breath to calm himself. Kai Wynn, I am asking for your help. The Kai's false smile became exceptionally brittle. Emissary, to express your belief in the legends of Jalbador and in these so-called orbs, well, that is not an example right-thinking Bajoran people would want their children to follow. Kira interrupted angrily. I would think that the best role model for Bajoran children would be one who encouraged the search for truth. The Kai blessed Kira with another blindingly insincere smile. Why, yes, my child, that is what you'd think. But if you are so certain these are the legendary orbs, prove it. Find the third. Sisko sighed. Kai, it took 60 years to find these two. I have better things to do. But it cannot be difficult, emissary. Look how they're pulsating with the fabled light of Jalbador. You mean you claim these are the red orbs without knowing the whole legend? Enlighten me, Kai. The Kai clapped her hands together in delight, almost laughing at him. 2 orbs glow when coming close to each other. But 3 orbs pulse. I would say that from the behavior of these orbs, the third one is quite nearby. Sisko looked at Kira. The one Terrell lost. Sisko looked back at Kai Wynn. So if we find the third orb, you will take them back to Bajor for study? The Kai's ingratiating smile returned in full force. Oh, that will hardly be necessary, because you will be able to prove they are real right away. You see, when the 3 red orbs are brought together, the doors to Jalbador open freely, and then, well, it is all in the legends, emissary. The world comes to an end. Kira gave Sisko a conspiratorial wink. What do you say? Shall we go on a wild orb hunt? You're not worried about the end of the world, Major? Kira looked directly at the Kai. Somehow, I don't think the prophets would spend 20,000 years trying to teach us about the universe and our place in it, and at the same time leave a big off switch lying around. Sisko picked up a red orb in each hand. Kai Wynn, we'll be back. Of course you will, emissary, because there are no such things as the red orbs of Jalbador. A few moments later, Sisko was standing on the deck of the promenade, slowly moving the orbs back and forth. Kira pointed toward Quark's bar. The pulsing seemed to speed up a bit. Why, Major, I think you're enjoying this. What I'm going to really enjoy, Captain, is helping the Kai carry 3 of these things onto her shuttle. Sisko laughed as he walked up the center of the promenade, swinging the orbs to the left and to the right. Kira looked at Sisko. Do you think Quark really did steal the third one? Only one way to find out. Sisko carried the red orbs of Jalbador into Quark's, where they proceeded to pulse faster than Sisko's suddenly racing heart. He walked straight up to the bar counter and put both red orbs side by side on it. Quark threw his dish towel down on the bar in disgust. Captain, please, those things are more trouble than they could ever be worth. Quark, we have reason to believe the third missing orb is in your bar, and we want to take a look. Sisko picked up the flashing orbs. May I? Oh, go ahead. And I hope if you find it, a prophet jumps out and bites you. Then Quark did the only thing he could do in the circumstances. He put an elbow on the bar, rested his head in his hand, and watched his customers leave in droves. Instead, the bar was packed with Starfleet types. Dull, boring, root-beer swilling slugs. And they were all on duty, too. Then, just to make matters worse, his idiot brother Rom chose this moment to walk in. Sisko came back to Quark. He pointed to the glass mural on the wall facing the bar counter. How long has that been there? You mean the, Admiral? Gul Dukat put it up. Sisko studied the portrait with a frown. So it was here, on the day of withdrawal. Quark closed the till, locked the order pads, then left the bar to join the Starfleet types at the base of the mural. The orbs were now on the deck in front of it, flashing madly. Chief O'Brien and Rom were kneeling to either side, waving tricorders around like they knew what they were doing. Jadzia stood behind them, looking exceptionally lovely, as always, Quark thought. Is there a problem, Captain? I don't know. According to the way these orbs are reacting, the third orb is behind that mural. O'Brien got to his feet and joined Sisko and Quark. If I didn't know better, I'd say there was a miniature sensor mask in there, just like the one Sator and Lean used in the water plant. That was too much for Quark. Why would anyone put a sensor mask inside a mural of a Tholian? He couldn't finish the statement. All he could think of was how much he hated the mural, how he had sworn he would tear it down the moment Gul Dukat left the station, and how, 6 years later, he still hadn't brought himself to do anything about it. Quark recognized the near ultrasonic Ferengi scream that pierced the bar, and shoved aside Sisko and O'Brien to peer around the back of the mural to see Rom, on his knees, staring into a small open access panel at the back of the mural, his face bathed in a rapidly flashing red light. I found it! I found the third orb! Suddenly, Odo was behind Quark, arms folded, ready to make an arrest.
Anything you'd like to tell me, Quark?
Odo, I didn't know it was there. I swear I didn't know. Then Sisko was at Quark's side. That's all right, Constable. I don't think he did know the orb was there. Odo snorted, disbelieving.
How could he not?
Sisko explained. For the same reason you and Garrick don't remember what happened to you on the day of withdrawal. Your memories were tampered with, and all I know is that it has something to do with Terrell and these orbs. Quark stood closer to his new best friend, the great Captain Sisko. Sisko looked at Kira. Should I put the three orbs together? Kira shrugged. Maybe that's not a good idea? You think they might actually cause the end of the world? Quark exploded. What? Sisko chided him. Calm down, Quark. It's part of the legend of Jalbador that when the three orbs are brought together, the temple doors open and the world ends. I don't want the world to end in my bar. Talk about being bad for business. O'Brien's attention was fixed on his tricorder. I'm picking up a lot of neutrino flux. Probably not a good idea to get them too close together. Sisko held up a hand that silenced Quark. You call it, Chief. O'Brien made an adjustment to his tricorder. 4 meters should be safe. Sisko smiled at Kira. Major, why don't you go back to the temple and invite Kai Wynn to visit Quark's? Kira grinned fiercely. With pleasure. Quark watched anxiously as Sisko lifted the newly discovered red orb and carried it to the bar. Soon all three were on the bar, one at each end and one dead center, all of them flashing so rapidly that they almost appeared to glow with steady lights. Quark turned to the red orb directly in front of him. There definitely was something inside the orb. He knew because there had been the last time. The city in the swamp, the glowing light approaching through the trees. Quark popped open his eyes in Ferengi alarm. You're not Moogie. He struck at the hideous monster before him, only at the last moment dimly realizing it was a reflection within the sparkling red facets of the orb. Quark, no! It could have been Captain Sisko who shouted. It could have been anyone. But by then it was too late, and Quark held the orb in his hand and felt himself swung around through the air. When he let go and fell to the deck, He looked up and saw that the 3 orbs were floating in mid-air, just a meter or so above the deck, spinning and glowing, each like an orb of the prophets, except their lights were blood red. Twisting tendrils of light snaked out from each orb to link up with the others, defining a triangle's edges, creating a glow, a darkness, a distortion of some strange type. Quark saw O'Brien try to touch one of the orbs and be flung back in a flash of red lightning. He saw Jadzia standing close to the floating orbs, aiming a tricorder at them, a sudden strong breeze tugging at her hair. Quark braced himself against the deck. Somehow, it felt as if the deck were sinking in the center of his bar, drawing everything toward it. The breeze was getting stronger. Now the flow of air blew into the bar, swirling napkins and debris into the center of the orb's pattern. Jadzia called out over the intensifying wind. "We've got intensive neutrino flux, a definite wormhole precursor." And then Kai Wynn and Major Kira were at the doorway of the bar. The Kai's saffron robes billowed around her. "Emissary, what have you done?" Quark could see Sisko tapping his communicator, giving orders, looking wild. His brother Rom pulled on his arm, dragging him around the bar, giving the floating orbs the widest possible berth. Then the lights went out, as if the entire power grid had blown. Sisko suddenly shouted, "Abandon station! Chief, Jadzia, pass the order on to abandon station!" Suddenly, new sources of light appeared on the promenade. Golden columns of quantum mist, energy beamouts. Quark felt Rom's fingernails dig into his arms. The whole station seemed to creak and flex. The glow from the bar became brighter. O'Brien shouted, "Rom, you're with me!" Quark saw O'Brien lunge for Rom and grab his brother's arm just as Rom held onto Quark's. Quark shouted, "Chief, what's happening?" "There's a wormhole opening in the station." Quark felt his heart stop. A wormhole was opening in the station? A wormhole was opening in his bar? Quark looked into his bar and saw the ridiculous mural sucked down into the center of the triangle formed by the floating, glowing orbs. As far as he was concerned, the legends of the red orbs of Jalbador were true. His world had come to an end. Sisko jumped down from the Defiant's transporter pad and ran into the corridor and to the bridge. He could already hear the ship's impulse engines coming online as she prepared to undock from the station. Worf was in the command chair and he stepped out as soon as Sisko appeared.
Sir, more than 1,000 people are already evacuated.
On the main viewer, Deep Space Nine stretched out to the stars, but it was only a dark silhouette against the Denorius belt. All station lights were out. Sisko knew just how fortunate the inhabitants and crew of the station were. With the Garno and the Bondar dispatched to help with the evacuation, more than 12 banks of transporters were operating at once. Jadzia and O'Brien were next on the bridge, followed by Bashir and Kira. A large glowing sphere of red energy blossomed over a section of the promenade, just below Ops. Sisko turned to Jadzia. "What is that?" "The wormhole precursor. It's continuing to accelerate." "Worf, what's the status of the evacuation?"
1,500 people away, but there is growing gravimetric distortion.
Worf fell silent as a chorus of gasps filled the bridge. The section of the habitat ring closest to the glowing red sphere of energy was beginning to buckle, bending like a broken wheel. Sisko stared at the screen in sickened fascination. "Release the docking clamps." On the viewer, 3 escape modules launched from the habitat ring, but instead of flying free of the station, they were drawn on perfect arcs into the red sphere. An icy hand seemed to clutch Sisko's heart. "Jake! Did anyone see Jake?" Bashir answered at once. "He's on board." A section of the habitat ring broke off and fell up into the red sphere. Jadzia made her report. "It's a wormhole, Benjamin. For some reason, it's opening about 100 times more slowly than the one we're used to, but it is opening. Major Kira, get us out of here." On the viewer, the image of Deep Space Nine, what was left of it, angled abruptly as the Defiant banked away. The starship shook violently as the viewer flared with blue energy. Worf shouted,
"We are under attack."
Sisko responded, "Full power to shields." Liege Terrell appeared on the viewer.
You're not going anywhere. Get back to your station, Captain. You found the third orb. Now you must join it. If Cardassia can't have them, then no one can. Fire.
Captain, her ship is cloaked.
Major Kira, we need to be stabilized so Worf can return fire. Kira called back. Our thrusters are offline. Impulse is out. All we've got is warp, and that's not powered up yet. Sisko turned to Jadzia. Can we get support from another ship? All channels are down, Benjamin. The other Starfleet ships are withdrawing. How can that be, Dax? Surely they can see we're in difficulty. Jadzia turned from her science station to Sisko. We're so close to that wormhole, we could be within some kind of event horizon. Those other ships might not even know we're still here. O'Brien reported, 30 seconds to warp. On the viewer, the red wormhole now obscured more than half of DS9. Sisko watched as the station's upper docking pylons began to twist down to the red distortion, hull plates popping loose like autumn leaves in a storm. Then one of the pylons broke free entirely as an explosion engulfed its base. It tumbled into the wormhole, visibly breaking up into still smaller pieces. Then, as if it were no more than a crumpled piece of tissue being pulled down a drain, Deep Space Nine fell in on itself, shattering like brittle ice, each shard drawn spinning into the endless, infinite tunnel of the red wormhole at its heart. Sisko felt a part of himself vanishing into that ravenous maw, to be lost forever, along with his station. O'Brien announced, "We have warp." On screen, the red wormhole continued to expand, continued to open, its unwinding coils of negative energy now reaching out for the Defiant. Sisko fell back in his chair, gripped the arms. "Now, Major." Terrell's voice echoed from all the bridge speakers at once.
Never.
And then a final blast of phaser fire hit the starship as she went to warp. And the first tendrils of the wormhole brushed across her hull to claim her. No one on board the Defiant had a chance. They were all engulfed in a red flash of overwhelming intensity, the sheer magnitude of which exceeded anything in their entire experience of existence. And then each moment dissolved into the next, until there was only the silence and the darkness of endless, infinite space. In the wormhole, in the hands of the prophets. Captain Jean-Luc Picard walks with the Sisko by the cool waters of Bejor. This does not happen. The Sisko says, "It does not, but it did. Look around and see it for yourself." They stand together on the promenade, the Sisko and O'Brien, and the Sisko and 12-year-old Jake with his bare feet in his fishing pole, and with Kai Wynn, and with Vic, and they watch the promenade die exactly as it dies the first time. Deck plates buckling, power currents sparking, debris and trailing strips of dislodged carpet spiraling into the singularity that is Quark's bar. Where the red wormhole opens the doors to the second temple. Admiral Ross sits across from the Sisko in the wardroom of Deep Space Nine. Behind him, the casualty lists scroll endlessly as the war with the Dominion begins. Ends. Begins again. There is no second temple. The Sisko stands at the center of Bahala, in the shade of the Bantaka Tower. But there was. Kira protests, "There is no was." The Sisko replies, "Then explain this." He is with them on the bridge of the Defiant, as Deep Space Nine is consumed by the red wormhole, and the ship is trapped in a net of energies that pull it from that time to another yet to be. In his restaurant in New Orleans, the Cisco's father says, "That time is meaningless." On the sands of Tyre, the Cisco's true mother says, "And another time yet to be is more meaningless still." The Cisco's laughter echoes in the serene confines of the Bajoran temple on the promenade. I am here to teach you, am I not? Then pay attention. The prophets take their places in the outfield as the Cisco steps up to the plate. The Cisco is delighted. He tosses his baseball into the air. It hangs like a planet in space, wheeling about Bajor Bahalev until there appears a baseball bat like a comet sparkling through the stars to... The Cisco is in the white space. Jennifer stands before him, her legs crushed by the debris on the dying Saratoga, her uniform sodden with her blood. "You keep bringing us back to the baseball game." The Cisco takes her hand in his. "Yes, because now it is you, all of you, who will not go forward." Jennifer is in the dress she wore on the day they were wed. There is no forward. If there is no forward, then why are we not already there? Why do you not know everything that I tell you? General Martok reminds him, "You are linear." The Cisco says, "So are you." And for the very first time, the Cisco now forces them from the white space to a place he makes real, where from the mists of the moon of AR 558, Jem'Hadar soldiers advance and Houdini mines explode all around them.
What is this?
This is death. This is change. This is the forward progression of time to an end in which there is no more forward. This is the fate of all beings, even your fate. Cleopatra looks up from the reflecting pool. Impossible. And now it is he who returns them to the white space. And you are all part of that continuum, from past to future, with an end before you, as surely as you had a beginning. Commander Arla asks in despair, "What is this?" "It is why I am here." Nog agrees. "You are the emissary." The Cisco shakes his head. "I am not the emissary. I am your emissary." The Cisco brings them all back to the baseball game. The Cisco throws a ball high in the air, swings, hits one out of the park, and all the prophets turn to watch the orb vanish in the brilliant blue sky. Do you see how things have changed? The way you were then, the way you are now. The prophets are silent. The Cisco tosses another baseball into the air. You want to find out what happens next because, for now, you just don't know. We know everything. Then answer me this. To whom do the prophets pray? But the prophets do not answer.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Millennium, The Fall of Terok Nor, was written by Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens. It was read by Joe Morton. It was abridged for audio by George Truitt. The recording engineer was Fran Pierce. Editing by Dan Mackesy. Sound design and post-production by Frog Pond Productions. Original music was composed by Carl Schertz, Dave Kersner, Eve Beglarian, Carl Sharif, Richard Heyman, Sam McCallie, and Richard Emmett. The associate producer was Will Carlino. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Millennium, The Fall of Terok Nor was produced and directed by Rick Bradley. This has been a presentation of Simon & Schuster Audio.